In the heart of ancient Egypt, amidst the towering pyramids and mysterious tombs, there existed a god whose presence was felt in the silence of death. He was the dark guardian, the silent watcher. His figure a jackal prowling through the sands of time. His name was Anubis, the god of mummification, protector of the dead, and the guide who led souls through the perilous journey into the afterlife. For centuries, his shadow loomed large over the Egyptian underworld, ensuring that those who passed were prepared for their final judgment. But who was Anubis really? Was he a mere god of death? Or did he represent something far deeper in the hearts of the Egyptians? Before Osiris, before the grand mythology of life, death, and resurrection, Anubis ruled over the dead. His role in the Egyptian pantheon predates many of the gods we associate with death, making him an enigmatic figure who bridges the gap between myth and reality. His face, that of a jackal, was the very symbol of mystery and fear, tied to the creatures who scavenged the outskirts of ancient cities and tombs, where death lingered like an uninvited guest. But what drove the Egyptians to venerate him? Was it because of his connection to the rites of mummification, or did Anubis represent a deeper cosmic truth about the finality of death, the preservation of the soul, and the necessity of balance in the universe? For centuries, scholars have wondered about the duality of Anubis's nature. As a protector, he safeguarded the dead from evil forces, but as the god who oversaw mummification, he was also a guide through the darkness, leading souls toward eternal life. His heart weighed heavy with secrets, and his role expanded as the underworld grew in significance. This god of the jackal, often overshadowed by the grand tales of Osiris and Isis, was far more than just a deity of burial rites. He held the keys to immortality, not just for the physical body, but for the soul's journey toward divine judgment. As we journey through the mysteries of Anubis, we will uncover the truth of his ancient power, the rituals he governed, and his influence that echoes across time, from the tombs of Egypt to the stories we tell today. But the real question remains: what does it mean to be the god of the dead? And how did Anubis shape the very belief in life after death? The story of Anubis begins long before the familiar tales of Osiris and his resurrection. While Osiris would later take center stage as the god of the afterlife, it was Anubis who initially governed the realm of death and the afterlife in ancient Egypt. To understand Anubis's significance, we must first look at his birth and early myths, which trace his divine lineage and his crucial role in the Egyptian pantheon. Anubis's parentage is both intriguing and essential to his identity as the god of the dead. According to most myths, Anubis was the son of Nephthys, the goddess of night, and Set, the god of chaos and disorder. However, the story of Anubis's birth is clouded with ambiguity and mystery. Some versions of the myth claim that Nephthys, after being rejected by her husband Set, tricked the great god Osiris into sleeping with her, resulting in the birth of Anubis. This tale of divine deceit and love underscores Anubis's role as a figure who, while linked to chaos through Set, was destined to serve a higher, more stabilizing function in the divine order. In other versions, Nephthys, mourning for her brother Osiris after his death at the hands of Set, sought solace in the form of her own son, Anubis. However, despite these variations in Anubis's birth, one thing remains constant. Anubis was always associated with death, protection, and the sacred rituals of the dead, long before Osiris's story came to dominate Egyptian beliefs about the afterlife. In the early stages of Egyptian mythology, Anubis did not share the same prominent position in the afterlife narrative as Osiris, who would later become synonymous with death and rebirth. In fact, Anubis was the chief deity in charge of embalming, the preservation of the body, and the protection of the deceased. His jackal head, a creature often seen scavenging the edges of cemeteries and burial sites, symbolized his connection to death and the process of mummification. It was Anubis who first took the role of embalmer, guiding the dead through the critical stages of the afterlife. The embalming process, one of the most sacred and elaborate rituals in ancient Egypt, was something Anubis oversaw with divine precision. Anubis's role as the protector of mummification ensured that the body would not decay and that the soul would have a vessel in which it could continue its journey. This position gave Anubis immense significance, as the Egyptians believed that without proper embalming and rituals, the soul could never attain eternal life. As the god of mummification, Anubis was not only a protector but also a guardian of the body, ensuring it remained intact for the journey ahead. However, Anubis's role evolved with time, and as the myth of Osiris took on greater importance, Anubis's duties began to shift. Osiris, who was initially associated with life, fertility, and agriculture, later became known as the god of the afterlife after his resurrection and reign over the underworld. As Osiris's role expanded, Anubis was increasingly seen as the god who prepared the deceased for the final judgment, not the one who ruled the realm of the dead. In many later versions of the myth, Anubis was portrayed as assisting Osiris, guiding the souls of the dead to the judgment hall, where the heart would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. While Anubis's prominence in the Egyptian pantheon may have diminished in the face of Osiris's rise, his role as the god of the dead remained vital. The process of embalming and mummification, which Anubis had perfected, became integral to the Egyptian understanding of death and the afterlife. The belief that death was not an end but a transition into another life was central to Egyptian culture, and Anubis's presence in that transition was irreplaceable. Anubis's symbolism, too, evolved over time. In earlier periods, his role as a protector of the dead was emphasized through his connection with the jackal, a scavenger and mourner at the edges of the desert, a symbol of death's inevitability. The jackal's association with the funerary rites was also tied to the idea of the animal guarding burial sites, keeping tombs safe from tomb robbers and ensuring the deceased were protected in their journey. Over time, the jackal-headed Anubis became one of the most iconic and enduring representations of Egyptian religious thought, a symbol of death but also of the care and reverence with which the Egyptians approached the mystery of the afterlife. In the development of Egyptian religion, the shift from Anubis's role as the sole protector of the dead to his position as the assistant to Osiris also reflects the broader evolution of death worship itself. Early on, the god of death was intimately tied to the rituals of preservation and physical protection of the body. But as the mythology of Osiris became more central, the focus shifted to the idea of resurrection, judgment, and eternal life. Anubis, as the god who oversaw the mummification process, became less the ruler of the dead and more the guide, ensuring that the deceased were prepared for their ultimate judgment before Osiris. This transition marks an important evolution in Egyptian thought. The divine journey of the soul, from its embalming to its judgment and eventual resurrection, was a process not just of physical preservation, but of spiritual elevation. Anubis, the mighty god of the dead, who first stood alone as the divine figure responsible for mummification and the afterlife, ultimately became part of a larger cosmic drama in which Osiris reigned supreme. But Anubis's story is far from one of diminished importance. His legacy lives on as the god who prepared the dead for the journey, ensuring that their bodies remained intact and their souls could pass through the gates of eternity. Among the many roles Anubis played in the vast tapestry of Egyptian mythology, none was as significant or as sacred as his role as the embalmer and protector of the mummy. The ritual of mummification was not just about preserving the physical body. It was a profound act of respect for the dead, a way to ensure that the soul could continue its journey into the afterlife. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, was the divine guide through this mysterious and meticulous process, a protector who ensured that the body, the earthly vessel, would not decay, and that the spirit could live on forever in the land of the dead. In ancient Egypt, mummification was an art, a sacred ritual passed down through generations. It was a delicate process, often taking up to 70 days, and it required both spiritual devotion and technical expertise. At the heart of this practice was Anubis, whose presence was central to ensuring that the deceased received the correct rites for a safe journey into the afterlife. As the god of embalming, Anubis's role was as much about divine protection as it was about ritual precision. He was not only the overseer of the physical preservation of the body, but also the guide who ensured that the deceased's soul was prepared for the trials ahead. The mummification process itself was long and intricate. It began with the washing and purification of the body, a symbolic act to cleanse the deceased from the physical world and prepare them for the spiritual realm. Anubis was believed to oversee this purification, ensuring that the body was ready for the transformation. After purification, the internal organs were carefully removed, the lungs, stomach, liver, and intestines, and placed in canopic jars. The heart, however, was left in place, believed to be the seat of the soul and the center of personal identity. Anubis's priests were the ones who carefully made the incision to remove the organs, a delicate operation symbolizing the separation of the soul from the body. Once the body was emptied of its organs, it was washed again, this time with natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture used to dry out the body. Anubis was often depicted as presiding over this stage of the ritual, ensuring that the body was properly preserved. After the dehydration process, the body was carefully wrapped in linen bandages, layer by layer, often adorned with amulets for protection. These amulets, sacred symbols such as scarabs, were placed between the layers of bandages to protect the deceased from evil spirits and guide them safely through the afterlife. The embalming priests would also place the Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and prayers, in the wrappings, meant to guide the soul through the dangerous journey that lay ahead. The mummy was then placed in a sarcophagus, a stone coffin often elaborately decorated with scenes of the afterlife, prayers, and depictions of the gods. The body was protected, preserved, and prepared to face the trials of the afterlife. In these final stages, Anubis's influence was seen in the rituals and the prayers offered by the priests of Anubis, who invoked his name to ensure the deceased's safe passage through the Hall of Judgment and into the afterlife. The dead were believed to stand before the judgment scales, where their heart would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the symbol of truth and justice. Anubis was often depicted as a god standing beside the scales, overseeing the judgment, ensuring that the soul's journey would proceed smoothly if the heart was found to be light with truth. The priests of Anubis, highly skilled and trained in the sacred rites of embalming, were essential figures in Egyptian society. These priests performed the mummification rituals and kept the sacred knowledge of death rites alive. They wore specific garments to distinguish themselves from other priests, including jackal-headed masks, symbolic of Anubis's own form. This priesthood was central to the Egyptian economy and society, as the preservation of the dead was seen as one of the highest forms of service to the gods. The ritual was not only an act of preservation but an expression of faith, as the Egyptians believed that the fate of the soul depended on the quality of its mummification. Death rites were as much a reflection of life as they were of the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that through proper embalming, the deceased could attain a form of immortality. Anubis's role in this process was sacred. He was not only the protector of the dead, but also the deity who ensured that the process was carried out with precision and respect. The mummification rituals performed under his watchful eye represented a spiritual journey from death to rebirth, allowing the deceased to pass into the afterlife and achieve a new existence in the field of reeds, an eternal paradise. The embalming process, with its complex rituals and profound spiritual meaning, reflects the Egyptian understanding of death and the afterlife. It was not just about physical preservation, but also about the belief that the soul, once properly cared for, would live on forever. Anubis, as the god of mummification, was the eternal guide for the deceased, standing as a protector and shepherd for all those who sought to pass from this world to the next. His legacy continues to echo through the tombs and pyramids of Egypt, where his influence over death and the afterlife remains one of the most enduring and fascinating aspects of Egyptian mythology. Anubis's role as the god of embalming and protector of the dead would have been incomplete without his most important duty, guiding the soul of the deceased through the ultimate test, the weighing of the heart. This ritual was one of the most important and mystical aspects of the Egyptian afterlife. It was here in the Hall of Ma'at that the soul of the deceased would face the judgment of the gods. Anubis, the god of death, was also the weigher of hearts, and it was under his watchful eye that the soul's fate was determined. Would it be granted eternal life, or would it be devoured by the terrifying force of Ammit, the goddess of unrepentant souls? The journey of the soul began after death, when Anubis took the deceased's body to the afterlife. The deceased was said to travel to the Hall of Ma'at, a space ruled by the goddess of truth, where the soul would undergo the critical judgment. In this hall, the soul would face the weighing of the heart, the crucial moment where the heart, the seat of the soul, would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, symbolizing truth and justice. Anubis's role in this moment was pivotal. As the protector and guide, he would be the one to oversee the process, ensuring the heart was weighed properly and that justice prevailed. The weighing of the heart was not simply a literal act of placing the heart on a scale. It was a symbolic ritual meant to evaluate the actions of the deceased during their life. The heart was considered the essence of a person's being, and it held all of their deeds, emotions, and intentions. The soul was believed to be made pure or tainted by its deeds. The deceased would stand before the goddess Ma'at, who represented cosmic order and truth, and Anubis would assist in placing the heart on the scales opposite her feather. If the heart was light, representing a life lived in balance, harmony, and truth, then the soul would pass into the afterlife, entering the field of reeds, an idyllic paradise. However, if the heart was heavy, burdened by sin, wrongdoing, or deceit, it would tip the scales in favor of Ammit, the devourer. Ammit, a terrifying creature, part lion, part hippopotamus, and part crocodile, represented the final punishment for souls deemed unworthy. If the heart was too heavy, it was devoured by Ammit, and the soul would face eternal annihilation, the second death. It was believed that to be devoured by Ammit meant the complete destruction of the soul, the loss of identity, and the inability to ever enter the afterlife. The soul's fate was thus sealed in this moment, with Anubis as the divine figure who ensured the accuracy of the judgment and the proper weighing of the heart. The process of judgment did not just involve the weighing of the heart, but also required the declaration of innocence, a key part of the soul's journey. The deceased would recite a series of negative confessions, a list of wrongdoings they had never committed during their life. These confessions included things like, "I have not stolen, I have not killed, I have not lied, and I have not harmed others." This declaration was meant to demonstrate the purity of the deceased's soul and their adherence to the principles of Ma'at, the fundamental order of the universe. The gods, including Anubis, would listen to these affirmations before proceeding with the judgment. If the deceased was able to prove their innocence, their heart would be found light, and they would be granted eternal life. The role of Anubis in this process was not just one of observation. Anubis was seen as the key intermediary between the living and the divine. While he was the protector of the dead and presided over mummification, he also guided the soul through the various trials of the afterlife. He was the divine embalmer, who not only ensured the preservation of the body, but also ensured the soul's safe passage through the dangers of the afterlife. Anubis's dual role as embalmer and weigher of hearts underscores his importance as both a protector of life and a guide to eternal existence. While Anubis oversaw the heart's weighing, he was not the final judge. The ultimate authority in the afterlife lay with Osiris, the god of resurrection and ruler of the underworld. Osiris, once king of Egypt and later the ruler of the dead, was seen as the final arbiter of the soul's fate. Anubis's role was to guide the soul to Osiris and to oversee the ritual of judgment. In this way, Anubis served as a necessary intermediary, both preserving the body and ensuring the soul's safe passage through the realm of the dead, while Osiris provided the ultimate judgment. In the Book of the Dead, an ancient Egyptian text that outlined the path the deceased would take to reach the afterlife, Anubis is often depicted standing beside the scales during the weighing of the heart. He is shown with a staff, overseeing the balance between Ma'at's feather and the heart of the deceased. This scene, found in many tombs, emphasizes his role as the divine protector who ensures that the soul's journey is both just and secure. His presence is both comforting and necessary, for without Anubis, the soul would be left to face the dangers of the underworld alone. The weighing of the heart and the judgment process reflect the Egyptian understanding of death as a continuation of life, a spiritual journey that required preparation, purification, and, most importantly, justice. In this cosmic drama, Anubis plays a pivotal role, not only as a guardian of the body but as a protector of the soul's path toward eternity. He stands as the ultimate guardian, guiding the dead through judgment, ensuring their souls are weighed in truth, and offering a chance at immortality in the afterlife. His role as the weigher of hearts cemented his place as one of the most revered gods in ancient Egypt, a god who ensured that life, death, and justice were always in balance. Anubis's significance in the Egyptian pantheon extended far beyond his mythological role as the protector of the dead. His presence was deeply interwoven with the physical spaces and practices of worship, as his followers built temples, created amulets, and inscribed sacred texts in his honor. These elements served not only as acts of devotion, but also as potent symbols of power, both divine and earthly. As the god of the afterlife, Anubis's worship became essential to Egyptian culture, especially during the funerary rites and rituals associated with death and resurrection. One of the most notable aspects of Anubis's worship was the temples dedicated to him, which served as sacred spaces for mummification and burial ceremonies. These temples were found throughout Egypt, often near the burial sites of pharaohs and nobility. The most famous of these temples was located in Sinopolis, a city named after Anubis himself, where priests presided over elaborate rituals associated with embalming and death. The Temple of Anubis was not merely a religious structure, it was a center of spiritual and physical preservation. These temples were often equipped with embalming rooms, where skilled priests performed the sacred task of preparing the dead for their journey into the afterlife. In these temples, priests of Anubis played a critical role. They were the gatekeepers of the knowledge and rituals necessary to ensure that the deceased received a proper send-off. These priests wore distinctive garb, including jackal-headed masks, to symbolize their connection to Anubis, whose animal form represented vigilance, protection, and the fierce guardianship of the tomb. The priests were not only responsible for conducting mummification ceremonies, but also for offering prayers and blessings to the deceased, invoking Anubis's power to guide the soul safely into the afterlife. They would recite the sacred spells of Anubis, which were designed to invoke divine protection for both the living and the dead. In these rituals, Anubis was called upon to preserve the body, protect it from corruption, and lead the deceased through the dangers of the underworld. Beyond the temples, amulets dedicated to Anubis were commonly worn by Egyptians, especially those who were preparing for death. These amulets were not only symbols of protection, but also tools to aid the soul in its journey after death. The jackal-headed figure of Anubis, carved in materials such as stone, gold, and faience, was believed to protect the deceased from evil spirits and guide them through the various stages of judgment. These amulets were often placed inside the tomb near the body, or were worn by mourners during the funeral procession. The belief was that these charms would ensure the deceased's safe passage into the afterlife, where Anubis would watch over them and guarantee that they received a favorable judgment. Anubis's imagery was rich with symbolism. The jackal was seen as a guardian of the dead in ancient Egypt because these scavenger animals were often seen roaming the cemeteries, protecting the burial grounds from intruders and marking the domain of death. The jackal's association with Anubis came to represent a figure that was both vigilant and protective, fierce yet noble. This symbolism also connected Anubis to the Earth's most sacred places, the burial grounds. In many depictions, Anubis was shown with the body of the deceased, guiding them through the underworld or protecting the tombs from thieves. His figure became a constant reminder of the necessity of divine protection for the dead, ensuring that nothing, not even death itself, would remain undisturbed. Anubis was also closely linked to sacred texts, many of which were inscribed in the tombs and burial chambers of the pharaohs and nobility. The Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and prayers meant to guide the deceased through the afterlife, frequently invoked Anubis's name. He was called upon to protect the deceased's body and soul, ensuring they could pass safely into the judgment hall, where they would face the weighing of the heart. Anubis's role as the protector and guide of the soul made him an integral part of these sacred texts, which were often placed in the tombs to accompany the deceased on their journey to the afterlife. Additionally, Anubis's presence in Egyptian art and monuments cannot be overlooked. His image, whether as a jackal-headed figure or as a man with a jackal's head, appeared in tombs, temples, and sacred sites across Egypt. These depictions were not merely artistic representations. They were symbols of his power and divine protection. In many temples, Anubis was shown standing at the gates of the underworld, or overseeing the mummification of the deceased, holding the scales of judgment and ensuring that the deceased received a just fate. The connection between Anubis and the symbolism of death was pervasive in the Egyptian worldview. Death was not seen as the end of existence, but as a transition, and Anubis was the divine figure who ensured that this transition occurred smoothly. His temples, his priests, his symbols, and his sacred texts all worked together to reinforce the belief that the soul could attain immortality through proper care, ritual, and divine protection. The Egyptians viewed death as a journey that required both physical preservation and spiritual guidance, and Anubis, as the god of the dead, embodied both of these elements. Anubis's worship was not limited to funerary rites. It was a powerful symbol of Egyptian resilience in the face of death. His presence in temples, his role in the mummification process, and his imagery in sacred texts all reflected the Egyptians' reverence for the afterlife, a belief that death was not an end, but a passage into a new existence. Anubis, as the protector of the dead, symbolized both the mystery and the continuity of life beyond the grave, a mystery that has continued to captivate and fascinate humanity for thousands of years. Anubis, the ancient Egyptian god of the dead, has long transcended the confines of his original role in the mummification process and judgment rituals. Though his significance waned during the later periods of Egypt's religious history, particularly as the worship of Osiris rose to prominence, his legacy endured and evolved, taking on new meanings in both religious and secular contexts. From the decline of ancient Egyptian civilization to the present day, Anubis has remained a figure of intrigue and fascination, reinterpreted, revived, and reimagined across cultures and mediums. In the later periods of ancient Egyptian history, especially during the Ptolemaic dynasty and the Roman occupation, the dominance of Osiris as the central deity of the afterlife overshadowed Anubis's earlier prominence. Osiris's story of death, resurrection, and eternal life became the core myth of Egyptian religion, and with it, the focus of afterlife worship shifted towards him. In this new religious landscape, Anubis's role became more subdued. No longer the chief god of the dead, Anubis became more of an assistant to Osiris, guiding souls to their judgment, but no longer ruling over the afterlife. Despite this diminished role, Anubis continued to be venerated, particularly in the tombs and burial rituals of the elite, where his protective influence was still crucial. His role as the guardian of mummification remained essential, ensuring that the embalming process continued under his divine oversight. However, with the advent of Christianity in Egypt and the eventual decline of the ancient Egyptian religion, Anubis's worship all but disappeared. The temples were closed, the rituals forgotten, and the knowledge of his importance in the Egyptian pantheon became obscured by centuries of religious transformation. Egypt's transition to Christianity, followed by the spread of Islam, marked the end of many of the ancient gods' active worship, and Anubis, along with many other deities, was relegated to history. Yet, even in this decline, Anubis's legacy was far from forgotten. His image, his symbolism, and his association with death and the afterlife continued to resonate through history. As Egyptology emerged as a scholarly discipline in the 19th century, a renewed interest in Anubis and other ancient Egyptian gods began to take shape. Archaeological discoveries of tombs, temples, and artifacts brought Anubis back into public consciousness. His figure, often depicted as a jackal-headed man, became iconic in the visual lexicon of Egyptology. Museums around the world displayed statues of Anubis, and scholars marveled at his role in ancient Egyptian religion, as Egypt's ancient civilization became a subject of fascination for both academics and the general public. Anubis emerged as one of the most recognizable figures of Egyptian mythology, his mysterious and regal form captivating the imagination of many. In the modern era, Anubis's transformation from an ancient god of death into a pop culture icon is nothing short of remarkable. Today, he exists as a multifaceted figure whose image is seen across various platforms, from video games and films to comic books and television shows. His dark, enigmatic presence has made him a popular character in media that delves into themes of the afterlife, death, and resurrection. In films such as the Mummy franchise and Gods of Egypt, Anubis appears as a powerful and sometimes fearsome deity, commanding the attention of modern audiences with his imposing presence and connection to the afterlife. His image has also appeared in graphic novels and animated series, often portrayed as both an antagonist and a guide, maintaining his ancient association with judgment and death, but infused with new layers of personality and intrigue. One of the most notable reinterpretations of Anubis has come in the world of video games. In franchises like Assassin's Creed, Anubis is reimagined as a deity involved in both the spiritual and physical worlds, his jackal head symbolizing not only death, but also the mystery and power of ancient Egypt. These portrayals emphasize Anubis's role as a protector and guardian, while also drawing on his association with judgment and the afterlife. His visual aesthetic, the jackal-headed god, sometimes adorned with golden robes and ancient symbols, continues to captivate gamers and storytellers alike, maintaining his presence in the public's consciousness. Anubis's symbolism has also been embraced in more contemporary spiritual contexts, where some modern pagans and followers of Egyptian revivalism have looked to Anubis as a spiritual guide. The god's associations with death and transition have made him a figure of reverence for those who honor ancestral spirits or seek protection in moments of personal transformation. His role as a god who guides souls through judgment and into eternity resonates with those who practice rituals related to death, grief, and rebirth, and he has become a symbol of resilience in the face of life's inevitable transitions. In fiction, Anubis's legacy as the guardian of the dead and weigher of souls ensures his place as an enduring character. He is a fixture in stories that explore the supernatural, the mystical, and the occult, where he is often invoked as a figure of power, judgment, and transition. His enigmatic and formidable nature as a deity associated with death ensures that Anubis's legacy continues to capture the imagination of both storytellers and audiences alike. Anubis's journey from ancient god to pop culture icon reflects not only his endurance through centuries of change, but also his inherent power to fascinate. From his role in guiding souls through judgment in ancient Egypt to his place as a symbol of death, transformation, and mystery in modern culture, Anubis continues to hold a unique and powerful position in the collective imagination. Whether as a god of the afterlife or a symbol in popular media, Anubis is a testament to the lasting power of ancient myths and their ability to adapt and thrive across time. Anubis, the god who watched over the dead, who guided souls through the vast unknown of the afterlife, remains one of the most enduring figures from ancient Egypt's rich spiritual tapestry. Though centuries have passed since his heyday, as the mighty protector of the tombs and the weigher of hearts. His influence endures, not just in the shadows of Egypt's ancient monuments, but in the stories we continue to tell, the art we create, and the symbols we hold dear. Anubis represents far more than the physical act of death. He embodies the deeper, eternal mysteries of existence, the balance between life and death, the preservation of the soul, and the journey into the afterlife that all humans must one day face. As the guardian of the deceased, Anubis was there to ensure that the body and soul were treated with the utmost respect, guiding both toward a safe passage. He acted as both protector and judge, overseeing the process of mummification and guiding the soul toward judgment in the Hall of Mayat. His role may have evolved with time, especially as the mythology surrounding Osiris grew, but his influence never disappeared. Even in the modern world, Anubis's imagery resonates strongly, from ancient temples and tombs to contemporary films, video games, and popular culture. His figure as the jackal-headed god has become synonymous with mystery, power, and death, qualities that continue to captivate the imagination. Anubis is a symbol of resilience. Despite the rise and fall of dynasties, the shifting sands of time, and the advent of new religions, Anubis remains an eternal figure. He represents the undying connection between the living and the dead, between the past and the future. His role is not just in death, but in life, reminding us that we are all mortal, yet always a part of something greater. As we reflect on the enduring legacy of Anubis, we are reminded of the timeless nature of his power, both as a deity and as a symbol. His watchful eyes may no longer scan the tombs of Egypt, but his presence still lingers in the myths we carry forward. So, if you found yourself captivated by the mystery of Anubis and the ancient rites that have shaped humanity's understanding of life and death, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this journey into the afterlife with others. Let's continue to explore the gods, the myths, and the powerful stories that have stood the test of time. Because in the end, Anubis is not just the god of the dead. He is the eternal watcher, guiding us through the unknown, ensuring that we are never truly alone, even in the darkest of passages.